Hello and welcome back to Doctor Who, The Cancelled Years. In this video, we'll be covering Series 1 of The Pyramid, so let's get started. The Pyramid would have been the first official Doctor Who spin-off. With Doctor Who changing with the Eternity War, Russell decided to create a spin-off for Doctor Who, which would act as a sort of stand-in for normal Doctor Who. The series had been planned and even hinted at as early as season 37, with the inclusion of Bernice and the Pyramid team in the Ghost of Victoria's Manor. The concept of the series would have saw Bernice Summerfield working with a new team at the Pyramid, dealing with aliens on Earth. The series would have been showrun by both Russell T Davies and writer Paul Cornell. Initially the series would have been just Russell, however Cornell was brought in as 1. He was the creator of Bernice Summerfield and had a better understanding of the character than anyone else, and 2. It gave Russell more time to work on Doctor Who. Russell and Cornell would have been executive producers alongside Matthew Robinson. For the show's main producer, Nicholas Schindler, who had worked with Russell on the previous show, was brought in as producer. The show itself would air on BBC Two and not BBC One, meaning it had less of a budget to play with. It also had a lower episode count of just 6 45-minute stories. For the main cast, Lisa Bauman was brought in to reprise her role as Bernice Summerfield, and she would have been seen as the main character. Joining her would be Eve Miles and Russell Tovey, reprising their roles as Jennifer Ward and Jack Afton. For the titles of the series, we would have got something quite different from the Doctor Who titles. It was mainly red text falling against a black background, with the cast names appearing on screen. Then we get the Pyramid logo and title name plus writer's credit. For the music of this series and theme music, it would have been done by Doctor Who composer David Arnold, who just left Doctor Who after the conclusion of season 38. And now, let's get to the episodes. The first episode would have been The Red Death, written by Paul Cornell. This would have been the second pilot for the series and would have been a very simple plot to reintroduce the characters to Bernice, Jennifer and Jack. We also would have saw how much the Pyramid has changed over the years since it was last seen on screen in 1996. Now the base of operations is located in an underground facility and in Cardiff, after the Rift moved closer to Cardiff and away from Little Cadwell. The story would have been a very basic plot. It would have been about a fungus growing on a tree, which floats through the atmosphere and grows on the backs of people, which turns them into homicidal killers. Eventually the spread of the fungus is stopped when the tree is burnt down, with the tree actually being revealed to be an alien in disguise. The second episode would have been Fugitives on the Moon, written by Russell T Davies. This story is very much the story Smith and Jones from our own universe, however it has some differences. Bernice, Jennifer and Jack go undercover as doctors in the local hospital, as they've been picking up alien lifeform signals from inside. Then out of nowhere, it begins to rain on just the hospital, but the rain is going up and not down. Then the building begins to shake violently, and when it stops, the trio find themselves on the surface of the moon. Jennifer gets lost in the hospital, so Bernice and Jack go looking for her, and while searching for her, Bernice bumps into an old friend, Chris Hector. Bernice and Chris have a nice reunion scene, and Chris tags along with her and Jack throughout the rest of the story. Throughout the story, we would have learned what happened to Chris after the events of the broken clock. It turns out that Chris got sent to Antarctica in the year 1989. He made his way back to the original Pyramid base over time, but saw that it was now abandoned. Thinking that Bernice had either moved on or died, he created his own team of investigators, but he lost them somewhere down the road, with him being the only survivor. The rest of the story plays out pretty much how it does in Smith and Jones, with the Judoon landing on the surface of the moon and entering the hospital in search of a fugitive. The fugitive drinks blood to disguise herself as human. Jennifer gets found by the team but is identified as an alien by the Judoon. Jennifer tricks the fugitive into drinking her blood, and the Judoon identify the fugitive as an alien. The Judoon execute the fugitive and they leave the hospital while returning it back to Earth. At the end of the story, Bernice shows Chris the new pyramid base and asks him if he'd like to join up, which he accepts. The third episode would have been Pleasure Gas, written by Chris Chibnall. This would have essentially been the Torchwood episode Day 1. No, not that Day 1 from Children of Earth. That's Day 1, the one for the sex gas. As such, I don't really need to discuss this one. The fourth episode would have been War World, written by Gareth Roberts. The story would have been about cracks appearing on the sides of buildings all across Cardiff. No one thinks much of the cracks at first, until all of a sudden, random alien soldiers from different races start showing up out of nowhere. At first everyone is confused and scared, but then multiple fights break out between the aliens and humans. Most people scatter, but some people choose to fight the aliens. The pyramid team take cover in the pyramid and attempt to figure out where these soldiers came from and what they're doing. It turns out that the cracks aren't actually cracks, and are instead gateways to a ship in outer space. The ship belongs to an outer space military force named the Strength, who were looking for Earth's best warriors by putting the planet against the wall. However, Earth isn't strong enough to combat the aliens, and the planet will eventually die out. Eventually the pyramid team is able to convince the aliens to leave peacefully, or else they'll nuke the planet. Obviously the pyramid team can't nuke the planet, but the aliens don't know that, so they're forced to leave peacefully. The fifth episode would have been Who is Bernice Summerfield, written by Steve Lyons. This story would have primarily focused around Bernice Summerfield. It would have saw her waking up one morning and living her life as usual. However, she begins to notice that no one around her seems to know who she is. Not even the security machines at the pyramid recognise her, and even Chris, Jennifer and Jack don't know who she is. Instead, she's been replaced by a woman named Mary Patel. It turns out that Mary Patel is in fact an alien who uses a filter to make herself look human, named Crazon. Crazon downloaded Bernice's mind and created a filter around the people she knew to forget Bernice existed, but to see Crazon as their friend. Eventually Bernice is able to get everyone to fight off the filter and see Crazon for what she really is, and Crazon ends up being killed by the pyramid team. The final episode would have been Wounded Time, written by Paul Cornell. The story would have essentially been the story Father's Day from our own universe, however with some differences. The story sees the pyramid team acquiring a piece of alien technology that gives them access to time travel. The team decide on what to do with it, and Chris asks if they can go back to 1965. The team are confused, but they reluctantly agree. However, we soon discover that the reason why Chris wanted to go back to 1965 was to save his father from being hit by a car and dying. The story plays out similar to Father's Day, with Bernice and Chris trapped in a church with Chris's family by the Reapers. Bernice herself soon gets killed by a Reaper when one itself is summoned inside the church when Chris accidentally interacts with his younger self. However, the Reaper is sent into time by the pyramid's time device. In the end, Chris's father makes the ultimate sacrifice to save the universe by letting himself get hit by the car. Chris is heavily affected by this, but is comforted by Bernice, who is now back from the dead along with Jennifer and Jack. And the story ends with the team going back to 2002 and Chris smashing the time device into pieces. And that concludes Series 1 of The Pyramid. It would have received some mixed reactions, but was mostly well received. So join me next time for Season 39 of Doctor Who. Until then, thank you for watching and goodbye.